because we are. Thank you very much for joining us in today's Pan-African History Call and Lecture. My name is Dushime Yvonne, and I'll be your host for today's meeting. So as usual, we always start our meetings with a prayer. I'm going to pray in my local language, called Kinyarwanda, like it's from Rwanda, Kinyarwanda. Yes. So let's pray. Uwiteka Mana nziza, turagushimiye turaguhimbaje, turakwigize ngo ukomeze ubane natwe, utwigaragarize, ubane natwe mu byo tujya kuvuga, uduteramo umugisha, sere twiyambaje mu izina rya Yesu Kristo. Amen. Yes. So in today's meeting and lecture, we're going to have different speakers from different countries. Then after the speakers, we're going to have our co-founder, Sinclair Skinner. Then after our co-founder, we are going to have the Pan-African healthcare class with Nana Akua. And at the end, we are going to have the Pan-African history class with Dr. Tyrone Wright. Yes, so stay tuned. Yes, so we are going to have our first speaker from Zimbabwe. Yes, Fikimbia, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Yes, Fikimbia, can you hear us?
Hello? Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear. Yes, you're welcome. You have 3 minutes to present your report.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where we are. My name is Fikimbia from Zimbabwe. The topic today is the historical roots and the contemporary significance of Pan-Africanism in fostering unity among African nations. Pan-Africanism, the idea that people of African descent have common interests and should be unified. Well, the roots of Africanism emerged in the 18th century in a response to European colonization and exploitation of the African continent. More so, on a lighter note, the Africanism's roots can be said to be in the struggles of the African people against enslavement and colonization, and this struggle may be traced back to the first resistance on slave ships, insurgents, and suicide through the constant plantation and colonial uprisings. Pan-Africanism was an attempt to create a sense of brotherhood and collaboration among all people of African descent, whether they lived inside or outside of Africa. The themes raised in this excerpt connect to the aspirations of people, the values of Europe, the European culture, and the world of African colonies. Coming to its contemporary significance, we see that it helped to launch a struggle for rights and equality for Black people in diaspora, although they were advocates of a return migration to Africa. Eventually, after 1945, Black people in the diaspora focused on rights and justice where they lived. However, the Pan-African thought influenced the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, which is called African Union hitherto, which was created or established in 1963. All being said, this organization that was established by the thought of Pan-African influence, therefore unity is being fostered in African in African countries. This unity is realized through the abolishment of slavery in the Caribbean to start with. It is conspicuous and obvious that Pan-African movement has contributed a lot to the emancipation of slave population in different corners of the world. Conclusively, Pan-Africanism is a nourished mother and hub of unity enforcement. No misgivings about it. I am because we are. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Fikimbia. That was a wonderful report. I am because we are. Yes, up next we are going to have our sister from Kenya, Christine Nekesa. Yes, Christine, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I hear you. Good
Yes,
morning,
welcome.
good evening. It's 5 p.m. in Kenya, so good evening. Right to our topic today, we're discussing the historical roots and contemporary significance of Pan-Africanism in fostering unity among the African nations. So, first things first, when we look at Pan-Africanism, the very first people who came up with the whole thing on Pan-Africanism, I believe, my school of thought believes that their core belief, whatever they had in mind, the very first thing they had in mind was unity. Unity for the Black person across the world, wherever you are, outside Africa, within Africa, in the Caribbean. That was their main purpose, unity. So when we look at what has been achieved up to today, we realize that, like right now, for example, we do realize that the colonialists were, should I use the word shaken? Yes, were shaken. The colonialists are afraid of what a united African nation can do. So that's why you will find so many, you find them thriving on our division. They really thrive on the division of the African person. Take an example. Okay, let's look at any division within the African countries. Let's look at Africa as a continent. Why is it that, for example, the US as a continent is just a block? We don't see countries. For example, here we have 50. How many countries are in Africa? 52, 53. They're about to do your homework. Why do we have those boundaries? They are supposed to bring the divisiveness, and that makes it easier for them to still, to still have a say within us. They will come and say, the West is doing ABCD, the South is doing ABCD. At the end of the day, we are always at loggerheads. But when we go to the initial, our initial people, the Pan-Africanists, right in the beginning, unity was the core factor. Unity was the real thing, I believe. So up to here where we are supposed to really, really come up with a way of remaining with the aspect of unity with us, so that at the end of the day, that unity will result into our strength, will result into a voice, a one voice, which is very strong at the end of the day. We will have, we will forge forward with being one thing, togetherness. Thank you so much. I believe my 3 minutes are up. Thank you. I am because we are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. That was our sister Christine Nekesa from Kenya. I am because we are. Yes, we are going to move to the next speaker. Yes, Salma, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Yes, Samuka Kroma.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You hear me? Hello?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, we can hear you, but you can turn on your video.
I'm some kind of command from Liberia. I would like by talking about the current African history, culture, pertaining the African nations. I would like by thanking the founders of Pan Africans, Dara brothers, and the founders of the Black People. I love blackpeople.com. This is Hannes. Hello?
Yes, we can
Uh,
hear you, but you can turn on your video.
uh, 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 my computer is not really something. So, yeah. The history, root, and contemplating significant front of African is to unite the African nations. The front Africanism was attempt to create a sensible of brotherhood and collaborating among the people of Africa, decent whether they live in Africa or outside of Africa. So the theme of front Africanism is to raise the essential connection and inspiring people to value to value the culture in the world of Africa. So the movement of front Africanism is dedicated to establish the independence of African nations and collaborating among the Black people throughout the world. The front Africanism attempt the seeking to raise Africans and people of African descent to work the common upliftment to improve the Africans are non-different. So based on that, the symptom of the African is to condemn the fearnet, abundant of place, the situation, the cause feeding of finance, the interference, homelessness, and embarrassment by other people pertaining the racism and appropriateness in Africa. So I would like by thanking the founder of Front Africans and Kwame Nkrumah, Martin Luther King, Marco Gardens, and the others who are contributed to form this unique organization that brings Africans together to unite the African nation and make we as one in Africa. So I will thank the organizers and take this time to appreciate them so much for creating this start in order to bring Africans together. So we are. So thank for the time is for.
Yes, thank you. That was our brother Samuka from Sierra Leone. Yes, thank you. Yes. Yes, I am, because we're going to continue with the next speaker, Sule Molo from Ghana. Yes, Sule, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, Yvonne, I can hear you. If you can also
Yes.
hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. You're welcome. You have 3 minutes to present your report.
Okay, thank you. Greetings to everyone. Let me just go straight because today I've seen that we are many. So as our the topic that I was given, historical roots and then significance of Africanism. Let me first start with the historical roots of the Black human race. That is today Africans. Who are we and where do we come from as a people? Modern day education has placed a blind eye on the origin of
Yes, Sule, can you hear us? Yes, Sule, can you hear us? Yes, I think they're having some issues with their network. Yes, we are going to have the next speaker, Yes, our next speaker is going to be Isaac Chimbwe from Zambia. Yes, Isaac, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Yes, Isaac Chimbwe, can you hear us? I think they're having some issues with the microphone. We are going to have the next speaker, Ife Sinachi Oruko, from Nigeria. Yes, Ife Sinachi, can you hear us? Yes, Ife Sinachi, can you hear us? Yes, I think speakers have issues with their network. Oh, yes, we can hear you and see. You're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. Present your report.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're participating from. I am Ife Sinachi Uroko, an ambassador from Nigeria. Today, we are discussing roots, I think Pan-Africanism roots and its contemporary significance. I think that's the topic. So, you know, Pan-Africanism is an ideology that intends to create a sense of brotherhood, a sense of oneness, a sense of commonness between the African brothers and sisters, whom was joined together or brought together during the Atlantic slave trade. So we can trace Pan-Africanism back to the era of slave trade. We can trace it back to the rebellions in the ship, the fightings for emancipation in the plantations. So it's when the colonizers came, they conquered Africa, and they had to create slave camps, slave prisons. They have to transport these slaves to different destinations, mostly to their farms for cheap labor. So in the process of doing these things, these Africans, they were brought together, and I think that is what gave birth to Pan-Africanism. That's when they had a common experience. And from that harsh experience of slavery, they were able to unite to say, man, we are going to fight, no matter what it takes. So I think in the 18th centuries, there were groups of Pan-Africanists in different locations, but history has it that in 1897, Henry Sylvester Williams, a barrister formed, I think, the first known Pan-African organization, African Association in London. So from there, in 1900, the same guy, Henry Sylvester Williams, organized the first Pan-African conference in London, that so many dignitaries, so many leaders as of then, Pan-African leaders as of then, like W.E.B. Dubios, and a lot of other great guys attended that conference. And from there, I think the journey started properly, because they started having other congresses,
Yes.
African congresses.
That
You
mean
know, you say?
you have a 30 seconds.
Yeah. So the ideology was properly formed, even though different individuals had their different ideologies, but the one ideology then was creating African nation, where the whole Africans will share a common identity. You see, that ideology have grown. It have grown to a great extent, being the fact that I Love Black People today is a product of that ideology, and they have taken a different dimension of trying to use technology to erase some of all those racisms. You see, there is a political group called EFF in South Africa, led by Julius Malema. It's a Pan-African group that intends to erase the economic barriers in Africa. So you see, the fight they fought in 18th century is different from the one they fought in 19th century, is different from the one we are fighting today. So this ideology have to keep growing, and it have to take another dimension in this generation, a dimension that will be
Yes,
a minute, a dimension that will be to create that desired nation, a nation free from external influence. And the only way we can create this nation free from external influence is when we break away from their institutions, because the neocolonialism today that we are fighting is through institutions, instruments they established to enslave us. That's what we are still using today. Is until we break away and define our own institutions that doesn't get standards, that the standard is not from the colonies, is when we get that desired Africa that we want. Thank you very much, and remain blessed. I am because you are.
yes, I am because we are. That was our brother Ife Sinachi from Nigeria. Yes, up next we're going to have brother Isaac Chibwe. Yes, from Zambia. Yes, Isaac, can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You're welcome.
Yes, madam. I can hear you. Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome. Yes, we can hear you. Good evening.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to unmute myself on the topic that says the historical roots and contemporary significance of Pan-Africanism in fostering unity among the African nations. First and foremost, I would want to define the same Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is the idea that people of African descent have common interests and should be unified. It is both political and cultural phenomenon that seeks to regenerate and celebrate Africa and its people. Now, coming to the history of Pan-Africanism, it dates back to the mid-19th century. It was led by Africans from the Western Hemisphere in the United States. The most important early Pan-Africanism were people like Martin Delaine and Alexander Crummell. These were both African Americans. So we have got another important figure, which was Edward Breden from Western India, and many more of them. Their voices from Pan-Africanism emphasized the commonalities between Africans and Black people in the United States. But I liked the idea of Martin, who believed that Black people could not prosper alongside whites and emphasized on the need that African Americans should separate from the United States and establish their own nation. It was a call for separation and not for isolation as per se. Pan-Africanism longs for Africans' liberation from imperialism and for the end of its nation's fragmentations. The current situation hinders Africa's development as a result of its resources being exploited for the benefit of the Western countries. Its importance in fostering unity can be seen from different perspectives, such as historical, which emerged as a response to the oppression and exploitation of Africans by colonialism and slavery. It aimed to resist the domination of foreign powers and said that the dignity and rights of African people. It also seeks to recover the lost and heritage of Africa, which had been distorted and erased by the colonizers. Political. Number two, it talks about political. It advocates for the liberation and independence of African nations from colonial rule. It also envisioned a unified Africa as a continent and federation that could cooperate and coordinate on a common issue such as economic development and security, and also human rights. Some of the achievements of Pan-Africanism in this regard includes the reformation of Organization of African Unity, OAU, which later became known as the African Union in 2004, in 2002, I mean, and the adoption of African Charter on Human and People's Rights in 1981. It talks also about culture. Culture, it seeks to promote and recognize an appreciation of the diversity and richness of African cultures and languages. It also fosters a sense of political solidarity, and identity among Africans and the African in diaspora who had been displaced and marginalized by the forces of history. And also, it also talks about the various artistic and intellectual movements, such as the Afrocentism, that celebrated the achievements and the contribution of African people to the world civilization. In all this, I am here to say that without radical solidarity among us as youth, it will be difficult for us to achieve what we want to achieve. So as Africans, I want to say that we need actually to unite and not beyond the boundaries that we have. For instance, I talk of our late President Gaddafi, who wanted to fight so much that Africa can be united. But because of traitors who are around this continent, we had our father Gaddafi being killed. And this is what we are supposed to do as young people of this continent, that we unite together for a common purpose, that we are able to liberate Africa. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. That was our brother Isaac Chibwe from Zambia. Yes, you're going to have our last speaker, Sule Molo. Hope you are not having issues with your internet.
Yvonne, I hope you can now hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, you have 3 minutes to your report.
Okay. Today, I'm struggling to join, but you should forgive me. It has been a while now. But let me just summarize it so that we just go straight to the point. as we were talking about historical root on this planet, if you don't know your history, you get lost. Who will you know who you are? It is your history that will teach you who you are, where you come from, what is your vision, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, your language and everything. So if we Africans get to dive into our history, know who we are. Why is it that today they call us Africans, but we speak different languages with similar donations, similar culture practice, and so on? So we Africans, we're not diving into our distance, our root. That is why we are suffering. And I think Pan-Africanism, as we have on the other side, now people see Pan-Africanism to be like a certain group of people. Pan-Africanism, I think that all Africans should be concerned about coming together. And that's where we now have Pan-Africanism. So we as Africans, when we read into our history, dive into our roots, that's where we get to know that we are the same people. There's no difference among us, no matter where you come from. Either you're Ghanaian, Zambian, Togolese, wherever you come from, we are all the same people. And when we trace into our history, we'll get to know that your ancestor will tell that I came from this place. My ancestor also tell him that I migrated from that end. You also have your own from that end. So where were they coming from? And we were scattered like this. So you see, if we get to know all these things, and Africans are not interested in this kind of history or stories about us, when we get to know, that's where our unity will now come from. And we will know that we as Africans, as we know today, the system that we are in now, we can never ever develop. As my brother said, this system is for the white people. That's why they have developed, and we are now going backward. So for us to develop as a people, we need to come together and unite as Africans. Thank you. Yvonne, let me end here so that you can continue. I am because, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. That was our brother Sulemora from Ghana. I am because we are. I would like to thank our speakers for today's topic. Now we can hear from our co-founder, Sinclair Skinner. Yes, you're welcome.
A good day, everyone. And again, thank you, Yvonne, and thank all the speakers who took time out of their busy schedule. We know everyone is definitely busy on the weekends with family and work and other things that you might be doing. So thank you for joining us in this opportunity to share our voices. What I find so fascinating is that we're able to leverage technology to meet each other in our homes. You know, it's not about getting on an airplane or getting a visa and dealing with some of those racist systems that keep us divided, that we're literally able to leverage this technology in our homes workable and share our point of view. And I think my background, if you don't know, as a co-founder is I'm an engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm not a historian. So anytime I get an opportunity to hear the wisdom of brothers and sisters, and we need more sisters. So look, I love to see the brothers on here, but we need some more sisters. So if we got to do something, Yvonne, to recruit, and thank you, Sister Yvonne, for being here, but we need to recruit more of our sisters to participate in our Pan-African movement. But with that being said, my background is engineering, and what we started here with I Love Black People is a tech startup. Myself, my co-founder is Mr. Christopher Mapindera, who's originally from Zimbabwe. My people were kidnapped maybe 400 some years ago. So I know I'm not Chinese, but I know I'm from Africa. So our backgrounds are together. And myself and my co-founder, who's also an engineer, developed this platform in order to bring us together to create a safety net. As we talk about Pan-African and the history, and we will continue to do that and discuss the ideology, you know, as an engineer, you know, our ideas are, how can we actually solve some problems? And what we used was a model that was done in the United States during American apartheid. We called it a Jim Crow, and Black folks were being killed throughout the country under laws that were literally wicked and there to harm Black people. And a gentleman by the name of Victor Green came up with a book called the Green Book. Now, I've had people say, why didn't they call it the Black Book? It was for Black folks. Well, y'all know how men can be. They can name something after themselves. They'll just name it. So they named it the Green Book after Victor Green. And it was a guide to make sure that when Black people traveled throughout Africa, throughout the United States, they could identify safe places where they wouldn't be killed or harmed or humiliated while they were traveling. And we took that model to say that no matter where we are as a people in the world, Black people should not be in fear. We should make sure no matter where we are as a people that we're treated with the dignity and respect that God has given all his children. So when we think of that, we said, well, how can we do that? You know, and we often hear people talk about unity, especially in our Pan-African movement, and they talk about their presidents and visas. Well, we said we're not waiting on politicians. I'm an engineer. You know, we're going to organize with accountants, with chefs, with bus drivers. We're not going to wait for politicians to decide what we need to do. We're going to do it ourselves. We're the adults in the room. No one's coming to save us. So we're not waiting for another election to live a better life. We're going to live a better life right now. And that's why we take responsibility to do things to make that happen. Just as much as white supremacy and people are doing things to harm us deliberately, we got to do deliberate things that actually help us to save ourselves. So it's important that we make sure that the people that we're dealing with, that we're building with, are interested in creating a world where Black people are safe no matter where they are. Now, how do we do that? One of the ways that we're doing that is literally like this call right here. We make sure that our members that we're bringing in have an opportunity to talk about the things that they're facing, to have an opportunity to share the knowledge and teach on these calls, because I learned some things just now on this call, and that right there is the power of us as a people. It doesn't matter how much money you have in your pocket, you have something to offer. So this is never a movement about capitalism or who's got money. This literally is about our value didn't come from any of those things. Our value comes from, again, we're not pushing religion here, but it comes from God. So we're not here to tell people who's what and who has better status. We're literally saying no matter who you are, there's 1.5 billion people on this planet of African descent. Let me say it one more time, 1.5 billion. It's at least the size of China. But we're all been fragmented and carved up, and like some of the folks said, but we're literally one people. And that being said, we need real protection from the things that have been harming us. So we have an app that we have, and we want to make sure everybody downloads that app. And on that app, it asks you to help us identify Black-friendly Pan-African spaces in 8 categories. So when we talk about building this nation, the nation that we're talking about building is not some political apparatus. When we say a unity in the nation, what we're saying is we want to be able to collaborate and work together. And Booker T. Washington talked about it. Even though we're talking about Black unity, we still all have our own ideas. You know, some people, favorite color is green. Some people's favorite color is blue. That don't mean we can't work together like the 5 fingers on the hand. Each finger may be different, but it works collectively. So when we talk about Pan-Africanism or I love Black people, I'm not asking you to think the same as me or to do what I do. What we're saying, we can collaborate on the areas that we have in common or we are common interests. Let's work together. Those things we disagree with, you work with other folks. But we don't have to, when we work with other folks, we don't have to say something bad about each other. We can keep that negativity. If we disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable. We can actually say, you know what, you think different than I do on this issue, fine. And we should be able to love each other in our differences. So even the space that we create, we want to make sure that space is safe, where we can disagree without being disagreeable or saying bad things to each other or having misogyny or Islamophobia or Christian phobia, whatever those phobias are. We're not here to hate or attack or harm our people. We're here to collaborate on the things that we have in common. So with that being said, it's important that we use this forum in order for us to collaborate and come together. We also have a radio show called I Love Black People. We definitely would love to have more of our members to come on the show and talk about some of the activities that they're doing. Again, the media is one of the ways that we can control our narrative, how we think about ourselves as well as how we think about each other. So make sure you get a chance. We have a Sirius XM show. It comes on 3 times a week. It's a satellite radio show, so we also have it online. But make sure that you get a chance to get involved with that. We're also with the app. We always promote it on the show. Make sure you identify Black-friendly Pan-African businesses in your community. And when I say Pan-African businesses, when you go to a doctor, you want to make sure that doctor is not going to see the fact that you're either from another country or you're from a different tribe, that they're going to have a problem with you. We need to make sure that we identify the healthcare, lawyers, places to eat, all these areas. We want to support people who support us as a collective. So we need but we don't know who these people are unless you and your community are sharing that information. So you need to be the one who says, look, I live in Kenya, or I live in Tanzania. Where are the places where, if my brother and sister comes from Liberia, my sister and brothers who might currently be in Kenya or currently be in Tanzania from other countries, we want to make sure they're treated well. You know, people talk about it in South Africa, about cases of Afrophobia, but we have issues like this taking place every day in all our communities, where just because a Black person is different from a different place or a different ethnic group, they're not treated with dignity and respect. It's our responsibility as Pan-Africanists to identify the places that every one of our brothers and sisters can go and be treated with the respect they deserve. That's what we're charged here with I Love Black People. So we're not here just to talk. We're not here just to debate. We're literally here to teach, learn, and to put into action, not one day but right now, the things that we actually believe in, the things that we know are true. We want to make sure we are building the safety net to protect each other. So with that being said, I definitely wanted to have a few questions. If Yvonne, there's 3 questions I can answer. Anybody have any questions for the founder? And then we can continue with the classes. I don't want to hold anybody up, but if there's any questions, I'd love to be able to have the folks put it in the chat. If you put it in the chat, we can look at the questions. But if not, listen, I want y'all to have a great weekend. The work that we're doing, I want everyone to be encouraged. You know, so often we talk about the issues. You know, right now there's a lot of people talking about the wars in the world. Let's be clear, there's been a war on Black people globally for the last 500 years. We've been dealing with a war on our people, and we got to be very, very focused on it. So I'm very concerned about when we see the wars in so-called Ukraine and even in Middle East. But there's our brothers and sisters being killed in the DRC. There's brothers and sisters being killed in the Sudan. There's brothers and sisters being killed in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., and other places in the world. We got to be serious. And we can't allow other people to dictate our priorities and our agenda. That doesn't mean we ignore the suffering of anyone. Our humanity is big enough to understand and actually feel the pain that people all over the world are facing. But we have to make sure that we're taking care of our family, our community, and make sure that the resources and the focus and the solutions are coming to our community. It's going to be hard to help somebody else if we're not helping our own community. So I say that contextually to say that we need to make sure there's no violence going on anywhere, and that we make sure that we stop any of those activities that are happening in those type of areas. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to stop all those type of things, and we have the power to do so. Again, we can leverage this technology to create a safety net that no matter where our people are, if they're in a conflict zone where people are being harmed and they have to leave and be refugees, we want to make sure wherever place they end up, we can help them identify Pan-African businesses and places that are safe, where they're treated with dignity and respect. I don't care what our people's situation is. It doesn't give anybody an excuse to humiliate them or harm them. And those are the things that we focus on at I Love Black People. And we couldn't do it without you. It's actually the members who've been crowdsourcing and sharing the information that they know in their communities so that other folks in other communities can be safe. So I'd say thank you again. Any questions? If not, we can go ahead and move forward, Sister Yvonne.
Yes, there is one question from Curtis Murphy. He's asking, how can I contact the radio show and share some ideas on what we are doing?
Oh, definitely. Let me give you some of our contacts. So info at I Love Black People. Our email that we use is info@iloveblackpeople.com. Please make sure you do that. We have WhatsApp groups that we actually share information. Definitely join our WhatsApp groups so you can share some information there. What else can you do? Of course, our social media. Please come on our social media. I think what we're going to do, Yvonne, moving forward, the folks that are participating and sharing information, coming on our classes, we need to come up with like a point system or something where some of our most active folks, things like, even though it might be simple as T-shirts, merchandise, I think there's things that we can do to show our appreciation for the brothers and sisters that are actually very active and engaged in the work we're doing. So please be on the lookout for that. We've been discussing ways, because some of you have been speakers multiple times on our Saturday call. So we definitely want to let you know that, we're definitely a small startup. We don't have a lot of capital, a lot of cash, but whatever resources we have, the biggest resource is each other. And we want to make sure you know that we appreciate your participation and your contribution of your time, which is your most important resource. And we say thank you, thank you, thank you. But info@iloveblackpeople.com is the email to reach out to us.
Yes, there is the last question from Sulemoro. He's asking, have seen that we Africans are just talking about, but understanding is not there. So how are we going to solve this problem?
Say it one more time.
I have seen that we Africans are just talking, but the understanding is not there. So how are we going to solve this problem?
Well, here's I'm going to say this, and I know he's not asking for all of this. I'm going to give it what it needs to be given. What we are doing as African people is amazing. I'm tired of people trying to talk about African people like we're losers and what we're doing is crazy and we don't know what's going on. We've been able to survive some of the most brutal, wicked things that humanity has ever seen. And we still here. We still have joy. We still have our families. Let me talk about people who didn't make it. If you've ever heard of a place called Australia, that's a place where literally the indigenous people didn't make it. They were conquered and literally destroyed to the point they don't even call them names. They call them Aborigines. That's not even a proper name. So when we think about our ancestors and what we are doing to fight the system of oppression, go to North America, where I'm right now. When you say the United States and you think of Europeans, well, let's be clear, the indigenous people there were defeated. So when we talk about Africans and what they're not capable of doing, you go to South America, the language they speak in South America, many of these places, they don't even know their indigenous languages anymore. You go to Mexico, many of them don't even know their indigenous. All they know is Spanish. And guess what? Guess where Spanish came from? From Europe. So what are people in that part of the world doing, only knowing a European language, which is from another place? But in Africa, we still know our languages. We still know our names. I don't care what we've been through as a people, we've resisted. And we're never going to surrender. As long as we don't surrender, as long as we don't we're going to make mistakes. There's things that we're going to do that's not going to work out. And we're going to have some folks that may lie and some people that didn't do what they were supposed to and they were cowards. But collectively as a people, we've been unstoppable. There's nothing that this system can do to defeat us as a people. The only way we can lose is if we surrender, if we give up. So with that being said, yes, there are some folks who don't understand what some of the folks on this call understand. Share the information. But what I do say to you is, when you have the information, you are obligated to do something with it. It's not like something to say, I'm smarter than you. That's silly. Or you're not conscious, I'm conscious, you don't know anything. That's silly. If you know so much, you have to do more with it. And because I'm an engineer, because my co-founder's an engineer, we developed a platform to allow people to help identify safe places where we'll be treated with dignity and respect. That's just, again, no matter what your field is, as a Pan-African with that ideology, you can apply that ideology to being a good cook, making sure we use foods that are helpful in developing the minds and the bodies of our people. If you're an actor or a musician, you can make sure you're creating music that elevates our people instead of destroys our people. So everyone has a role to play. Just don't surrender. You're going to make mistakes. That is okay. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and let's keep moving. So none of this is about being perfect or knowing everything. Take what you know, take what you understand, and do something to help protect our people from the system. And we're going to create a world, because at the end of the day, what I've seen, what we see going on right now in the world with all these wars and all this violence, is unsustainable. This thing is going to end. And the question is, when it ends, what are we going to create to replace it? We've seen many empires fall. What are we going to do as a people collectively, as Pan-Africanists, to create a world based on justice and equality, that people are treated with dignity and respect? We can create that without waiting for mayors and presidents, and governors. We can create a nation within our own communities where we connect using these technologies and people with common interests and common ideologies like Pan-Africanism. So again, we don't have to wait for someone to change the visa laws. We can literally start organizing, just like this call, brothers and sisters all over the world who have a common interest to protect Black people from racism and Afrophobia and create a world that's worth living in for our children. Again, I added a little bit more than the question asked, but I think all of us have a role to play. We should share, even though everybody might have different understandings at different times.
Yes.
Well, with that being said, thank you so much for everyone sharing your time. We could never repay you. We're going to pay forward, though. And thank you so much for every person. I know everyone's going through something. Like when we talk about everybody got their own family issues, we definitely appreciate y'all took the time out to come here and share. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. That was our co-founder, Sinclair Skinner. Thank you for those wonderful insights. We are going to continue with the Pan-African healthcare class with Nana Akua. Yes, Nana Akua, you're welcome.
Greetings. Thank you. Hello. Hey, Sinclair. Hey, Yvonne. Hello, everyone. Hey, Frederick and Paul and Abraham and Etha Sanache. I think I saw Curtis. Oh, hey, Curtis. Hey, Hapson. Christine. Is it Bokari? Please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing, and I think Peacemaker might be on there. But greetings, everyone. Thank you all so much. I love to see cameras on and actual faces. Pinda, Kayala. All right, very good. So greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Pan-African healthcare class. A little dark in here. I am challenged with light in my area, in the space where I teach, but this little light kind of hurts my eyes. So, but I know it looks particularly dark today. I'll see if I can withstand the light and see how that suits me. But we are going to continue today to talk about I think we'll talk about nutrition. A little bit. I just can't look over that way because then it's gonna hurt my eyes. But so we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition. We talked yesterday as we sort of last week as we sort of restarted the beginning of the cycle. We talked about holistic health and what that means, some of the aspects of that. I think we talked about our food and quality of food and additives and things of that nature. And so I want to talk a little bit today about foods, what should be in our foods, what nutritional value we may find in foods or should look for in foods. All of these things are really important because as we talk about all that we have to do as Black people, all that we've already overcome, and all the work that is still yet to be done that we are, of course, persevering in and striving towards. We want to make sure that we're healthy, that we're happy, and that we're able to really do all of the tasks that are before us. And what we put into our bodies on a physical level, what we allow into our bodies in terms of into our spirits, our soul, into our psyche, our mental, all of these things are important in terms of us being able to do the work that we are put here to do. So we're going to talk kind of heavy on the food part or the physical side, but know that always, even if I talk about detox and we're focusing more so on physical detox, know that all of these aspects or all of these components are essential. Everything is relevant and relative. We know that it is mind, body, spirit, emotions. All of these aspects have to be in balance. But we will spend some time talking about what we should be consuming. So let me see if I can add my, I see now it's not gonna work. Somehow I did not pull it up correctly. Already can see this is not happening. I had it up earlier, but some days I get it exactly right, and some days I do not. So while I'm pulling that up, so let's talk a little bit about what we find in foods. What is nutrition? What are nutrients rather? What should we look for in foods? What should we have in our diets? What are helpful or sustainable or life-giving or life-producing? We know that all of these are important in making good decisions about what we add into the body. So we know that nutrition, and I think I have it now. So we know that nutrients are substances that are found in food. These provide nourishment to the body, and there are 6 main components. We have carbohydrates, we have fats, we have proteins, we have vitamins, we have minerals, we have water. Water is listed last, and we really don't have any slides on that, but let me spend some time talking about water. I personally have not done well with my water intake for some weeks now, maybe even a little longer. But know that water is essential. And it will, the lack of water will increase your likelihood of so many conditions, so many discomforts, diseases, illnesses. It could range from body aches, muscle cramps, headaches, other body aches. It can be conditions that have to do with toxicity because we're not flushing our bodies well enough. So it could be any number of conditions that we really need water for. We know that 2/3 of the earth is consumed or made up of water, as is our bodies. And so water is key. We talked about, and it may have been last week or a previous week, I pointed out some of the hydrating foods. And if that was last week, then maybe we have actually talked about this, but let me do a kind of quick recap. So we know that there are certain fruits and vegetables that are really high in water, right? We know that celery and cucumbers and melons and said cucumber, celery, some others that I'm just not thinking of right now. But we know that there are many hydrating fruits and vegetables that we can add into our diets, and this is going to be essential. And we know that 2 to 3 hours every day, we should be hydrating ourselves with water. We know that we shouldn't gulp just water just one time or 2 times a day. We should be hydrating our bodies throughout the day. Half our weight in ounces every 2 or 3 hours is going to be the best formula in which to do that. And so water is essential. No way around it. You can't replace it with anything. We really, really have to make sure that we hydrate ourselves. And so in addition to water, we know that carbohydrates are important. We know that proteins and fats, vitamins, minerals, all of these are aspects that we have to get from our foods. And while most of us will eat for pleasure, we have to really focus on eating for nutrition and eating for our survival and our ability to thrive and fight off disease and infections and illness. And so we want to really be clear on what foods to include and what foods to exclude from our diets. So I think sometimes these weeks run together. So I think we spoke about this last week, but I know we didn't get so much into the actual vitamins and minerals, and I want to spend a little bit of time with that. When we're talking about our micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, what we really should aspire to is foods that contain high levels of vitamins and minerals. And that really should be our source for those nutrients, not pills or capsules or other supplements to get our nutrition or to get our vitamins and minerals. They should really be coming from our foods. And if we are taking supplementation, we really want to get food-based or whole food vitamins and minerals, meaning these are vitamins and minerals that are made from herbs and fruits and vegetables, not synthetic, not man-made vitamins and minerals, but actual food-based supplements. So some of the vitamins that we need for the body are highlighted here. I will not, of course, go through all of these, but I want you to really have a good understanding. And this is something, in addition to your schedule of, your chores or what to do for the family or where to go or certain routines, this chart or one similar to it should be posted on your refrigerator, just as we post other reminders. And this will give you, and you'll develop and you'll build on, your memory and your understanding of what nutrition is found in different foods that we eat. This is an excellent way, I think, to use this chart. It's not something you will have to memorize, but if you have it handy, when you're in the kitchen, when you're preparing or planning for your meals, know very clearly what substances will be in those foods that will help you. And then, of course, based on what your needs are, you can be heavy on those particular foods. So if you know your energy is low, and the time of year is this cold and flu season in the winter months, or if it's allergy season in the spring, and you need to boost up your immune system, plus add on some energy, then we know that we want to do those foods that are high in our B vitamins, right? So we want to add chickpeas and potatoes and salmon and tuna and fruits, and if you consume dairy products, seafoods, things like that. We want to do it based on what our needs are so that we're truly using food as our medicine. Along those same lines, if we know we have some sort of wound or cut or scar on our skin, if we, again, need to boost our immune system, fight off infection, things like that, then we know we want to go heavy on foods that are high in vitamin C. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cantaloupe, kiwi fruit, peppers, strawberries, tomatoes, things of that nature, making sure that we're truly, again, getting some health benefit from what we're consuming. And sure, combine it with other things, but, be a little heavy-handed with our fruits and our vegetables and our foods that are providing us the nutrition that we need. If we're aging, for example, and our bones are becoming a little more brittle, or we're cramps, or having really some muscle spasms and things like that, you may focus on foods that are high in your calcium for your bone health, for forming those and keeping those strong, and kind of fighting off some of the joint pain and some of the issues we have as we age with calcium, like vegetables, spinach, kale, broccoli, turnip greens. If you consume tofu, if you do dairy products, salmon. And of course, we know that the salmon and the sardines and things with the bones are best, even though I must admit I get the boneless and the skinless just because it's easier. But of course, we know it's healthier. So if you're used to, if you do the canned salmon, fresh, of course, is best. But if you do the canned salmon, it really is better if you are getting the kind with the bones in it. However, if you're going to pick the bones out anyway, and you're not going to crush it up and mix it all in when you're making your salmon croquettes or your salmon patties or salmon cakes, then you may as well do what I do and get the boneless or skinless. But these are all foods that are high in calcium that you can truly add to your diet and get some health benefits from it. If you're having muscle spasms or cramping and things like that, you want to focus on your magnesium or your potassium, and you want to be heavy on those foods that have magnesium, like your avocados, your bananas, your beans and peas and potatoes, and nuts and seeds like pumpkin seeds and things of that nature. Potassium is really important if you're talking about muscle contractions and things of that nature. Bananas, beet greens, oranges, potatoes, prunes. Really eat very intentionally is, I think, my point here. Be really intentional about what you're putting into your body and why, and getting as much nutrition from your foods as possible. I want to highlight this handout because we also know that in addition to the fruits and vegetables or dairy products or whatever meats that you may include in your diet, especially if for some of these that we listed that mainly come from meat or dairy, and if you are vegetarian or vegan, know that you don't have to be talked into, right? You don't have to be convinced to consume flesh or dairy if that is not what you desire to eat, because know that you can get things like B12 and B6 and some calcium, magnesium, some of these that are heavy on the dairy and meat side. There are herbs that naturally contain these vitamins and these minerals as well. So know that if you cannot get a lot of your nutrition from the actual foods, the food group of herbs and spices can supply you your vitamins and your minerals that you need. So if, for example, B12 becomes a big issue for vegans, for example, well, there is a whole list here of herbs that are very high in B12: burdock, catnip, chickweed, dandelion, eyebright, ginseng, red clover. So know that there are other options in addition to the foods. We know that we don't have to drink our white or black teas in terms of our morning tea or our after dinner tea. We can use these actual herbal teas and really get some powerful healing benefits or healthy benefits from them as well. So this handout is here. If you need these handouts, I think if Yvonne hasn't already, if you can put my email in the chat, feel free to request these handouts. Again, this is another thing to put on your refrigerator. Reference this. If you are at the health food store or you're at the herbalist and you're looking to figure out, okay, well, what herbs should I be taking? You can use you can determine that based on whatever health issues you have. But if you don't have health issues, or if you know that you have certain nutrients that you need to increase your intake of, choose those herbs that are high in those vitamins and those minerals. I do believe we scrolled through this last time. So let's talk about diets. So in terms of also what we eat, we can make a conscious decision to have certain types of diets that we follow, even if it's not a daily thing, and maybe we do it seasonally, maybe we do it, for 21 days out of a month, and we go back to our usual, for a few months, and we kind of alternate with that. There are different diets you can follow that will also help increase your nutritional intake. So if you follow a raw food diet for some time, this is food that is lightly cooked, no more than, I think, 110, 115 degrees. So raw or really low temperature kind of cooking that usually will come from sort of a food processor or Ninja or what have you. Juicing, marinated or hydrated or dehydrated, I should say, types of foods will usually be what's contained in a raw food diet. Straight juicing or juice fasting is another diet that you can follow, unless you are someone that's a raw foodist and does a lot of juicing every day. This might be something you simply do 3 days, 7 days, 21 days, that you do just sporadically throughout the year, where you're consuming freshly pressed juices, raw, unprocessed fruits and vegetables. This is something that really helps get natural enzymes into the body, will improve your digestion, will aid in your elimination and your cleansing or detoxification. These are good options for you as well. There's the macrobiotic diet. This is usually an Asian-based diet, heavy on the vegetables and grains. They have a lot of rules that you kind of follow in terms of when to eat, what to eat, how to prepare your foods, what to prepare your foods with. That's something that is outlined in more detail in the health edition of the Global Green Book. All of these diets are explained a little more deeply than these handouts here. Gerson diet, this sort of combines a couple of aspects. It combines certain supplementation along with organic, vegetarian, or raw or juicing types of diets. So this is an option for you as well. So just know that in terms of eating, figure out what's the purpose of the diet, what's the purpose of, your routine or your habits with food. Are you treating a health condition such as high cholesterol or irritable bowel syndrome or allergies or high blood pressure, diabetes? Or are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to build muscle? Are you trying to increase your energy? All of these things you have to consider in determining what type of diet to follow, what aspects that you want to, implement. All of these might just need to be very specific to your needs. Some people will focus purely on whether to eat meat or not. I would say, even if you want to focus on being vegetarian, I always point out the need to become as sugar-free as possible. And that might even be a more important goal than becoming vegetarian, because sugar becomes a big issue for a lot of people and a lot of conditions. So whether it's excess weight, whether it's diabetes or heart disease or something of that nature, you have to put as much focus and effort into limiting or eliminating altogether sugars in the diet. So this becomes something that a lot of people overlook, and they may be vegetarian or they restrict whatever meats or dairy, but you also have to consider sugars and sweeteners that are added to your drinks, that are added to your foods. All of these have a major impact on your health. We did talk about food combining. I think we got to the elements of healthy eating. I'm pretty sure, and again, forgive me if I'm repeating, but I want to get to this handout. This gives us good indication of how well we are doing with our diets, right? This is a quick assessment that you can take to determine how good you're doing. And because of the types of questions, you know, they kind of point you in the right direction and help you determine where you need to focus. Do you add sugar to your food or drink almost every day? Do you eat foods that already have added sugars to it? You have to read the labels. You have to know that sucrose and lactose and maltodextrin and so many of these items will be sugar, but it may not say sugar. Aspartame and sucralose and all of these things we know are sugars, and it may not be spelled out as SUGAR, right? So read the labels, understand what the ingredients are to make that determination. Do you use a lot of salt in your food? Are you adding salt? Are you using these seasonings that are really heavily salt-based? Another issue with seasonings are also sugar-based. A lot of the seasonings will not only have sugar, but also salt. So read your spice labels that you're adding to your foods. Read those really carefully and be very conscious about what foods you're seasoning or what seasonings you're using in your foods. Do you drink more than 3 cups of tea a day or coffee a day? Do you smoke more than 5 cigarettes a week? Do you use recreational drugs? Do you drink more than an ounce of alcohol a day? All of these are good indications for how you're doing with your diet. Are you eating fried foods, processed foods? Are you drinking plenty of water? All of these things give you a good indication of how well you're doing with your diet. And there's even a grading scale here to give you tips on, okay, you're doing okay, you're pretty health conscious, or you're not doing well at all and you really, really need to make some changes as indicated if you have, say, 15 to 20. So these are good tools to use to make a good assessment of your diet and what things you may need to change. So again, if you need the handout, let me know. You can email me. I do have a couple of moments if you have questions that you want to put in the chat. And then next week, we will talk about herbs and how to use herbs and for different healing for ailments and conditions that we have in the Black community. So as always, I bid you good health and peace, and I am because we are.
Yes, thank you very much, Nana Akua, for that wonderful lecture. Enjoy your weekend. I am because we are. Yes, we are going to continue. In the meantime, I just shared your email. If you'd like to receive the handouts, you can just email her on nanakua1@gmail.com. Yes, we are going to continue the Pan-African History lecture with Dr. Tyrone, right?
Hi,
Yes.
how are you?
Yes, I'm fine. You're welcome.
Okay, I'm ready. And I'll be on camera in 2 minutes. So welcome everyone to the Pan-African History and Organizing course. I have an interesting commentary today and lecture. We're going to talk about Liberia. One of the requests that was made of me was that I cover different things as opposed to just sticking to the curriculum as it was. And I'm attempting to do that, and I'm glad because it gives me some room to talk about contemporary issues as it relates to Pan-Africanism. And there is some current events that are taking place in the world now that force us, those of us who are interested in history and understanding how some of our struggles as African people relate to world events. And so there's some recent events in the world, and not so recent, that cause us. So for example, in the past, because of the war in Ukraine, many people were talking about Russia and Russia's relationship to Africa and Black people. And currently, you obviously know that whether you're interested in not, the media and those in conjunction with them have forced us to have our eyes on Israel and Palestine. And if your politics is a certain way, then you believe it's all Palestine. So we have to, or we're forced to, pay attention. Now, leading up to this weekend, I probably plan to do something different. But then I read an article that spoke to something that is specific to our context. And I know you would be interested, but not only that, I think it's important for us to be informed, because this is an issue that I've addressed in my work. And it's sometimes hard for us to understand the political dynamics. And what I'm talking about, just to get to it, is Liberia. And the fact that while a lot of, at least people in the United States and African people around the globe can relate to the plight of the Palestinian people being displaced, being put upon by the Western world, having them impose their will, initiate war. And yes, they have what they call what the rest of the world would call so-called terrorist organization. The Palestinian people probably would call such an organization something different, right? Perhaps revolutionary, perhaps revolutionary organization that addresses the occupation of the territory by Israeli nationals. So I wanted to talk about one. I'm going to share this article in a few moments, and you will see me. I'm running a little late this morning. This morning is a little different. But so you will see that. But two, I'm also going to share for your reading this week a chapter I wrote in the book Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanists. Because where this article falls short, this previous work that I did answers the question about who else came to the defense of Liberia when African so-called Americans or Americo-Liberians were acting in a way that was questionable, and the politics on the ground was questionable. So I'm going to get right to it. I'm just going to make it plain. Liberia, while it is one of only two African nations that were never colonized by European nations, the Americo-Liberian population that would end up there, who were the formerly enslaved African people, or the people who survived the institution of slavery in America specifically, would then, after settling, set up a system of discrimination and marginalization against the indigenous Liberian population that had never been removed. This is something that we don't like to talk about, okay? Something like that we don't like to talk about. This is something that we need to know about, because while we can say Liberia was one of only two African nations that was never colonized, you will have others who will talk about the colonization of Liberia by Americo-Liberians. And the whole thing is very problematic. This is a conversation that is much needed, because sometimes we do not understand, Africans in the diaspora, that the posture, I'm sorry, guys, I'm washing my hands. The posture that we take with regard he's talking about, I'm looking at the comments. Yes, I am going to talk about things that we don't like to talk about because we need to be informed and we're in control. We're in control of this. This situation that I'm discussing today, this is a situation we are in control of. And in context and spaces like this is where we get the work done in understanding the ideological position we should take, okay? The problem with the Americo-Liberian presence in Liberia is rooted in the fact that Americo-Liberians, after surviving the institution of slavery, would then go to set up a system that would marginalize the indigenous Liberian population. And in much of the same way, in similar ways as the systems of marginalization were set up against Africans who were enslaved in America. This is deeply problematic because you wonder how the survivors of such an institution could go and engage in some or similar activity, and maybe not with all the atrocities, but at all, right? Engage in such activity at all. Very problematic, something we don't like to talk about. And I'm going to give you my case that I wrote in my book, but also this article that begs and points out that some of our biggest Pan-Africanists of our time, or in the recent 20th century and 21st into the 20th century, let's say that. Speaking of Garvey, speaking of Du Bois, who we have discussed here, would not take the proper position or posture on this. And I've addressed this before one time in the past when using the work of Garvey. One of the texts that I use mentions in his own words, the colonization of Liberia. And I said that, this is problematic, that he would think that was appropriate, and the term colonization at all is deeply problematic coming from any African person, period. So with that said, let me get a copy of my book because I want to cite some things, but let's see. Any of that coming from us is going to be a problem because of our historical past and our collective past as a people. So that is what I'm going to address today. I thought about sharing a brief video about the first woman president and the founding of Liberia, but it turned out to not be what I wanted because of the fact that it cites some things that I would rather speak on than necessarily refer to in video. Okay, so I'm not going to show that, but I will be using two supportive documents to have this discussion today. Okay, and that is an article recently written by a gentleman who criticized this very issue, but also gave some room to understanding with regard to the fact that we still face white supremacy and culture, marginalization, and a hyper expression of racism in the United States and the world at large, okay? So give me 1 second. I'm going to share something because I want to go right to it. 1 moment. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to try to talk while the pause is on. So let me just go to something while I pull up the article and share it. And I'm also sharing this in your group in real time because it's important. Many of us feel like, well, we've never done anything like that. And there is some sharp criticism to be leveled at us. And this is just in all honesty, because I'm trying to express something that's very complicated in a simple way. It's very important that we understand this, particularly those diasporic Africans, those of us born out here in the West. I had the opportunity to live on the African continent at one time, and I also had the opportunity to engage some other so-called African Americans who were living on the continent at the time. These sentiments of superiority that come from people who live in the West are very freely discussed within those circles when we are on the continent. And those are things that we have to struggle around and be very clear that they are very much defining of who we are. This is a constant conversation that I have engaged in because I'm aware of the fact that the only place that diasporic Africans have some sense of racial ambiguity is when they are on the continent of Africa. And I would challenge that. I would challenge that because the truth of the matter is that when we return to the United States, you are just like any other African and Black person in the United States. And that is a problem if you assume the posture of something other than that when you are on the continent of Africa, okay? And so I can't get into a full history of Liberia, but I will give you some basic points from the chapter I wrote on this, and sort of bring you up to speed about some basic things that led to what I believe and understand historically as the seed of war in Liberia, okay? One of my positions about human beings is that we all have an inkling, we all have the ability to oppress. We all, and that does not necessarily mean our heads are in line with that. We all have the ability to oppress, right? Meaning dominate whatever is not as strong or perceived to be different than us. What makes us not do that is having a fundamental belief and value in not being oppressive, okay? Anti-oppression. One of the things that have derailed our struggle as African people so often is we don't acknowledge that about ourselves as human beings, and therefore we cannot address it when it does happen, right? Certainly, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, because in another context or in a larger context, I'm experiencing victimhood. No, we can oppress, we can exploit, we can marginalize, ostracize. What keeps us from doing that are going to be our fundamental values, that you believe that leads to no good end, and that does not speak to who we are, and it is not in integrity. Okay, so once we have that conversation, that we can engage in this kind of behavior, we are not neutral in that respect, then we can deal with it when it does happen, and when we do it, and we can also have some checks and balances for ourselves in our own personal behavior to not act oppressively. So let me just share, I'm gonna let you see me for 2 seconds. Let you know that this is not a bot talking, but it's in fact me. But then I'm gonna quickly go right to the documents I'm gonna share. Sorry, you're hearing this scratch around on the table. But so, this is what I'm going to lecture on today. And I want, Yvonne, can you just give me a time check? Just like, what time is it right now? Is it 11? Is it 11? Because my watch is fast. What time is it?
Yes, 10 minutes remaining.
Okay. She said 10 minutes remaining. All right. So it's 11:35 is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I wanted you all to see me really quickly. Just know I'm really here. And then I'm going to go to the article in question and how it relates to what we do here, because 2 of our major Pan-Africanists will support Liberia. And it's very interesting to understand that Liberia is the dream of African people who were enslaved, left the United States, and repatriated to the continent of Africa. And you have to wonder how those very people could endorse a system that would oppress other African people. It is very problematic. It is something we seldom talk about. And when the association with Africans in America with Liberia is spoken about, it is assumed that the African person from America is aligned with the Americo-Liberian position. I want to tell you my bottom line to all of this. Not all were. Not all of our great Pan-Africanists were aligned with these oppressive systems that were put in place against the indigenous African population, or the indigenous Liberian population in particular, and aligned with the Americo-Liberian position. And none other than, once again, and this is why I wrote it, once again, Booker T. Washington was not. And it's interesting because some people believe, because he was a very American figure, that he probably would have been aligned with the whole system that Americo-Liberians put in place. That is not the case. However, Du Bois was, unfortunately, Marcus Garvey was. And that's not my own take on it. That was in their own words. So I want to share an article with you that I'm going to put in the group. I'm going to press share. Well, first let me take myself up here. Have a breath, share. Okay. Okay. So this is an article that I recently read, and I thought it would be perfect for our class because of the simple fact that, you know, unless we engage around issues like this, then our education really is nothing. Or what we're trying to do is nothing. Okay. Those moments when you are in question that is this Pan-Africanist in nature, you know, and that you have a question about that. These are the issues that sometimes will present those questions about your posture, your thinking, your engagement, and identifying, qualifying something as Pan-Africanist in the highest sense, okay? Once again, Pan-Africanism is simply not, it is not simply coming together with other people who are African, in which case Liberia would be a great example. However, it's not that. It is unity for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation. So as much as we would like to call Liberia in many instances a Pan-Africanist model, the coming together in one nation of Africans from the United States who had survived slavery and Africans on the continent who had not been displaced and never colonized by a European nation, is not necessarily a Pan-Africanist model because of what happened there. That's when we get into qualifying things, okay? So as you can see, this article was written by someone, Joseph Assad, for, this is on opinion, human rights. And it's an opinion piece on human rights. And it's called Liberia, the African-American settler colony that parallels Israel. And quite telling. We have to engage it, just as Israel remains an ally of European imperial powers and the US, Liberia, and the US, Liberia's Black colonists, rulers were close allies to the US government throughout their history, okay? And it shows the Liberian president in 2019 there. So even before I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I'm just going to touch on parts in it and just make some clarity. The caveats that you're going to take away from such an article is this. Yes, we had people who were African people in America and Black people in America who aspired to re-engage Africa as their ancestral homeland. And with that, did not understand that there were contradictions that they could express. Very likely they didn't even understand that they had these contradictions until in the situation and engaging. However, I will say as a whole, there are some people who knew that they were not about to just simply assimilate into indigenous groups or ethnicities because they were no longer, and very likely are not regionally descendants of that particular landmass that is known as Liberia. In other words, Africans who find themselves in the diaspora from a number of places on the African continent. And yes, even from the interior, as we were kidnapped and sold and resold to the coast and then sold into the diaspora. So you know, I don't know. Some people say the DNA stuff is not good. If you want to know specifics, then you do that or get close to some idea of that. That being said, it is not 100% conclusive that Africans from America are specifically from Liberia, right? But we know that generally we are direct descendants from the African continent, right? And so there are many groups that do know specifics, like the Gullah Geechee, or I should say Gullah, but I have Gullah background, so I could say Geechee. That's a group that knows exactly where they're from on the African continent because they're direct transplants. However, majority of African so-called Americans do not necessarily know where they are from or what ethnic group they come from, right? So they are resettled in Liberia. The organization that settled the African population from America in Liberia was a racist organization. And I'm saying that conclusively. It was an organization founded in 1816 that held the position that there would never be freedom for African people in America. And so it would be best to send them back to Africa because there would never be a sharing of power. They would never put up with free African people in America. And they certainly wouldn't put up with them voting or anything else. And so the best thing is to be real about it and send them back to Africa. That was the concept of the American Colonization Society. So a rather extreme and racist organization. Now, side note, something you should know. There were many back to Africa movements that African people in America would initiate, participate in. Garvey is the latter and most popular that people know, but there were many others. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner was a proponent of it. Edward Blyden would be a proponent of returning back to Africa. Henry Highland Garnett would also support that position. Who else? Many others. However, the reality is this: the most successful Back to Africa movement was initiated by a U.S. government affiliate organization called the American Colonization Society, and it was not a Black organization. Okay, it was a racist organization. They had the most successful Back to Africa movement in the history of the United States. How ironic. When Black proponents of return to Africa, back to Africa, raised their voices about the issue, there was always a critique and criticism that was negative in nature. Okay, they were crazy. They did not represent the African population in America. Many other things, unrealistic, so on and so forth. However, when a racist white organization not only initiates, but recruits and executes a repatriation or a resettling of African people from America to Africa, it is not criticized. Okay? For years, Liberia, from 1847 on, was never a financed organization, a financed nation by the United States. So in other words, let me say it another way. The United States in 1847, when a large group of Africans in America are finally resettled in Liberia, the United States does not stake claims to Liberia in any way. And so there are no economic relationships between the United States and Liberia. The only entity funding the expatriation and resettling of the African population to Liberia is this organization called the American Colonization Society. Formerly enslaved persons would write this organization, or free Africans in America would write this organization because they had heard and responded to their advertisement to resettle Africans in America. The organization in turn would financially support the persons resettling, or the peoples or the group resettling. There were many situations and scenarios where they would conclusively resettle, and I'm thinking of a specific case, resettle a group of people at a time in light of situations that occurred here in the United States. I was just researching one earlier this year, back in May, specifically, where there had been a revolt of sorts, and those individuals were resettled in Liberia. But just to move along with what the point of this is, even before the release of Europe-based Amnesty International's recent report castigating Israel as an apartheid state since 1948, the Israeli foreign minister charged the organization with its ready-made and knee-jerk defense of anti-Semitism used against any and all critics of Israel. US-based Jewish organizations also accused the yet unpublished reports of fueling anti-Semitism, and later condemned it as outright anti-Semitic. So what this is saying is that, and how this relates, I'm going to make those connections. What this is saying is that as people criticize Israel's position in Palestine, their retort or their rebuttal is that you're anti-Semitic. This is why you see a problem with our posture in Israel, or in Palestine. Okay. And I'm choosing those words wisely. I'm consciously referring to it as Palestine because those are the people who were there. This is an encroachment of that territory, and this is an encroachment upon the people. So that being said, what this author gives is the story of Liberia, and then points out the similarities. The rebuttal of Africans in America, or those aligned with Liberia, was often that criticism of our settlement or our resettlement. And I'm saying our because I definitely acknowledge that I'm an African born in America, and it would be people who were positioned socially and historically just as I am, who are resettled in Liberia. So this is where the our. The rebuttal by some of the leading Pan-Africanists at the time, namely Du Bois, is that it's racist to criticize Americo-Liberian position in Liberia. And it could have been. However, that is not separate, or it is not to say that Americo-Liberians could not act oppressively or create systems that marginalize, dominate, exploit, and abuse the indigenous Liberian population. And it did. Okay, it did. There's no denying that. Okay, so Liberia was founded in the early 19th century. In 1816, a number of Southern U.S. slave owners and Northern abolitionists joined the white American Protestant fanatical clergymen intent on expelling freed Blacks from the U.S. back to Africa, founded the American Colonization Society. Despite the opposition of African Americans to the project, the ACS, American Colonization Society, helped freed Black slaves to conquer a territory in West Africa and establish a settler colony on indigenous African lands. Now, this conquering of, I don't think so. However, definitely not a clean integration of the people. They called it Liberia to express their freedom. The story of Zionism and Israel are quite similar in that the idea of shipping European Jews to Palestine was also a Protestant, evangelical, and anti-Semitic idea, which the majority of European Jews opposed until the late 19th century, when a minority Jewish movement came to champion it. So you see the parallels, right? The Western world supporting the resettling of a marginalized cultural and racial group in each case with their support. Now, does Israel receive more support than Liberia ever did, or Americo-Liberians ever did in Liberia? Absolutely. But I can tell you from the case that I wrote on the Liberian crisis that the US government, while no economic commitment was made to Americo-Liberians by the government, US government, they sat off the coast of Liberia and put down clashes between the Americo-Liberian population and the indigenous African population, okay? And certainly to and in the favor of the Americo-Liberian population, which would have been in the minority, okay, in Liberia. So no economic support in the way that Israel got support, but certainly reinforcement, military reinforcement, and support for clashes between the two groups, and meaning violent clashes, not verbal, okay? As the Black colonists left the land of the slaves in the 1820s and headed to West Africa, armed with the Bible, armed with the Bible and Protestant fanaticism to convert Africans, they took over the land of the indigenous peoples with the help of white supremacist Americans who dispatched them, suppressing indigenous anti-colonial revolts for the next century and a half with the help of the US. The Liberian story parallels that of Israel, a settler colony founded with the help of Western powers on the land of the Palestinians, whom it has subjugated and continues to oppress with the help of the same powers. Like the Israelis who champion their freedom from anti-Semitism with no regard to the Palestinians who they subjugate, the Americo-Liberians also champion their project as one of freed Black slaves who established their own independent free state with no regard to the indigenous Africans they oppressed. Okay, I see no lies there. All right, to my understanding of history as a historian of the African reality, I don't see any consistency there that's accurate. Revolts against the African American colony continued at the beginning of the 20th century and were harshly put down. The Grebo Revolt in 1909 to 1910 and the Cool People's Revolt in 1915 are major examples. As Liberian-US relations were expanding during World War I, in 1918, the US military helped put down a native revolt and trained the Liberian Frontier Force, which has been busy abusing Liberia's African natives for years. So let me just say this. This part, I'm not going to read it because I'm going to try to wrap up, and I see it's 12 o'clock. What's the point? The point is that there are parallels being drawn here, and the parallels are accurate to the extent that the position, the physical reality very likely is similar in the sense that you have a resettlement, you have support from a Western entity not necessarily the whole nation. As you'll see in my case, I share with you how resistant the United States was to support Americo-Liberians and the nation of Liberia. And it's a person, Booker T. Washington, who forces there to be some support for it. However, what Booker T. Washington does that is very important, and when you produce a work, you think it's important, but I see how important it is right now to speak on this. Unlike Du Bois and even Garvey, Booker T. Washington took a position on the Americo-Liberian and indigenous Liberian reality and conflict. And he affirmed the indigenous Liberian person, as I do in this conversation, because in this conflict and conversation, because it is fundamentally wrong for anyone, red, black, blue, green, whatever, from whatever ethnicity, to move into someone else's house they're occupying and refuse to go and live in peace and create systems that marginalize that person or persons in their own house. If you don't go and live in peace, then you should not go at all. Right? And there's great irony in the African person's position from America to know they are living and leaving a hell in America and go to some place in Africa, any place in Africa, and create a hell for the people who are there. Big problem, okay? Big contradiction. I want to highlight this little part before I end, and I really, in this small amount of time, can't do this issue justice, but just know that we have some of the same issues internally as African people. And I think that we can understand that because we know about geopolitical issues on the continent and that we can be in conflict, but we also have to be real about the issues and real about the subtext of those issues, right? Those things that we don't say or that we don't talk about. Both Garvey and Du Bois submitted different plans to the League of Nations to grant lands to African Americans and Afro-Caribbeans in the former German colonies, which Germany lost during World War I for colonization. The League turned down both proposals. Very problematic. Let me go back right above that. It says neither Garvey nor Du Bois or the NAACP showed much concern for the oppression of the natives of Liberia by the American colonists and their descendants. Du Bois thought it was absolutely necessary for the government to take a high hand with the natives. This is Du Bois, unfortunately, in order to assure them that it was really a government. Otherwise, the tribal chiefs would take matters in their own hands. In 1918, Du Bois wrote that the principle of self-determination cannot be wholly applied to semi-civilized people. One of both Garvey and Du Bois's contradictions, right? The scandal of Liberia's ruling colonists' use of indigenous African Liberians as slave labor, evident since before the World War, reverberated in the League of Nations when in 1926, Liberia signed over a 99-year lease on 1 million acres of its land to a U.S. company which wanted Liberian rubber. So we know that neither Du Bois or Garvey criticized this. And, there's easy ways to do further research. I am very casually aware of Garvey's use of the word colonization. which I think this is what makes someone like Booker T. Washington even more notable, because of the simple fact that he, in turn, came out and said that he was not in support of the colonization of, he used the term Negro at the time, of the Negro anywhere, not in the Sudan or anywhere in the world. And here you have two of our greatest Pan-Africanists, but not Pan-Africanists that predate Booker T. Washington, right? The irony of that, who, without properly critiquing the nature of colonization in very varying ways, did support it on the ground in Liberia against indigenous Liberians. So let me just skip really quickly to what I'm going to share with you in the group, a case that I wrote. This is about the Liberian crisis. It comes from the book that I wrote, Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist. Booker T. Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist. That's the name of the book. I just cited a chapter in the book that you guys already read. This is chapter 5 in the book, and it's about the Liberian crisis. Briefly, Washington negotiates to preserve Liberia from the encroachment by French, British, and German colonial forces, right? But this is in light already of the settlement of so-called Americo-Liberians. I opened the chapter really briefly where he says, no one, not even the citizens of Liberia, is more interested in the progress and success of the Republic than I am. And you would naturally assume that he's affirming and taking the Americo-Liberian position. That's not necessarily the case. That is not the case. What he does is support Liberia in its survival, but then level the most important recommendations that could ever be leveled in this case. And that is the recommendations he gives to the leadership, political leadership in Liberia when this whole long case of the Liberian crisis comes to an end. Booker T. Washington gave his own recommendations, which he communicated directly to Ernest Lyon and President Daniel Howard of Liberia. His advice and recommendations addressed 3 important areas of Liberian life: education, economics, and social relations that had been disrupted since the settlement of Americo-Liberians in the country. Hold on. Okay. Washington warned President Howard regarding the rift between Liberians and Americo-Liberians. Washington knew that the conflict between the two groups held the potential to destabilize the nation. He suggested that the whole future of Liberia hinges upon its ability to get a hold of the native population, for the tribal Liberian has a very real grievance against the minority of Americo-Liberians, descendants of deported American slaves who ran the government and controlled the economy. Although African American, Washington was acutely aware of the inherent injustice involved in resettling formerly enslaved Africans back in Africa, especially as they in turn attempted to colonize Liberia and institutionalize American-style discrimination and policies in their new country. Washington warned that failure to resolve conflicts between the two populations would hinder the nation's growth and threaten its eventual. So, Watt's behavior and activity in light of the entire case is all clandestine and behind the scenes. He is not the personality that Du Bois was or that Garvey was. He took no fanfare in most of his interaction. However, he did, hold on, screen. Okay, yeah, okay. All right. He did understand the volatile nature of the reality on the ground, and that was important because the others did not take a position going into the future. It is important for us to respect and acknowledge our contradictions and acknowledge injustice, even when perpetuated by us. And so he did that. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to put the article, you know, I have to, because I'll go on and on and on as I am known to do. And I'm going to leave the article, which I think is a good read and gives you a lot of information about the history, the dynamic, and the posture we need to assume when we engage each other, right? We know we have ethnic conflict. We have ethnic conflict on the continent. We have ethnic conflict out in the diaspora amongst Africans and African people who have been scattered in diaspora abroad. You know, how do we get to Pan-African unity in light of that? Okay. How do we acknowledge, because we don't change what we don't acknowledge. We don't, you know, make changes when you don't perceive a problem. And there are serious problems with the Americo-Liberian posture that has been the seed of war in Liberia. So, you know, this is exercise for us to have a critique of our when we engage each other, acknowledge that our ability to oppress and exploit, take some ownership of that. And also too, you know, it's reminiscent of what so many of our leadership has talked about, ability of African people to internalize the European and white racial pathology, okay? And act in the role of the to one's own people, okay? So I think it's important. I will post both. I'll post the article in the group, in the Telegram group. I'll also post this chapter on Liberia. I don't usually use it anymore because it's rather long and it's a protracted case. But I wanted to share that not all Africans in America assume the posture of Americo-Liberians. They acknowledge the right of Liberia to survive in the world, to be uncolonized by Western nations. But criticism has to be leveled by around what did take place there, the internal conflicts and problems, and the proclivity by the Americo-Liberians to, in essence, colonize Liberia and subjugate Liberia, the indigenous Liberian population. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there. I'll look at your comments really quickly. Let me see. Okay, so not much. Hello, Doctor. Good to hear your voice. Have a conversation with you after the class. How do I reach you? Who is this? Let me see. Hold on. It's a direct message. Okay. Sarah. Okay, so call me. I don't usually, so just so you know, because I've seen like a lot of missed calls in WhatsApp. I don't usually use WhatsApp like when I'm not on here. I come on there, check a couple of things that I go, so I don't get like alerts or notifications from it. But you do have my WhatsApp information. Can you tell me that, Sarah? And I know I'm not saying your name right. Can you answer that? Do you have my WhatsApp information in here? I think you can see me on WhatsApp. Okay, so I'm gonna respond. Please contact me on WhatsApp and then set up a time where we can speak. Okay. But it seems like nobody had any comments, so that's a good thing. All right, this is another. Okay, so write me in WhatsApp first, and then, and I'll communicate with you, and then we'll talk about the time to talk. Okay. And so, okay, you did? All right. So let me just tell you, I'm not faithful to WhatsApp. I'm making a note to self to go in there and look for this but I get no notifications. I don't allow it to, because as so many people are in there and I can't properly manage it, if that makes any sense. It's too overwhelming for me. But I will, when I get off of here, and look for your communications, and I will respond to you. Okay, and then we can set up a time to talk. All right? Okay. Okay. All righty. So, no questions, comments. I just wanted to make sure that I covered this. It's very contemporary in terms of present situations. And I think it keeps us abreast, and staying on our P's and Q's in terms of our own posture and our own position as it relates to African people in the world. Okay. So I am, because we are, I'm sorry that I'm over, shamefully over, like 1 hour. I mean, not 1 hour, but 30 minutes. And I will see you next week. I'll be posting these 2 documents. I'll post the article, and I will be posting the chapter on Liberia, the Liberian crisis. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, what about Telegram, Dr. Thanks always. I don't even use Telegram. It's for the post stuff for this group, for this class. So WhatsApp would be better. I don't even know. Does Telegram have phone communications?
I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So WhatsApp is better. And you have my information in WhatsApp. So that's good. I will check it shortly after this. Okay. All right, Sarah, stay around. All right. Thank you all. I am, because we are. Have a good day.
Okay. Bye. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Wright.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Someone says it has phone communication, but I'm not educated. So WhatsApp. Okay. Bye-bye.